there, or mixed with other data. You want to put them, organize them, right? And transcribing is a big task if you're doing interviews, right? Because you're transforming data from the audio into written, right? Written data. So that is a lot. In fact, there are companies now that do transcribing. By the way, that you can think about setting up a company next to your university and say, well, I offer this transcribing business to you. If you do not have time, I'll help you. That's because transcribing takes long hours to do, right? So there's that transcribing process, and then processing the transcriptions, processing the data, and storing the data. These are all part of your research process. Number 7, gathering and managing data. And the other side to that is the training, quality control, and authentication of your data, right? Think about this. If you have a team of numerators or interviewers, right, or people who are in your focus group discussion, you have like 5 focus group discussion, you get your friends to come together and help. You want to train them first, right? Or you yourself need to get the training, right? You do not know how to work on SPSS or Atlas, or the Atlas is a new Envivo qualitative data, right? Then you want to think, okay, I need training for this one, or I need to train people to know how to carry out research and all that. So that is training. Quality control. How do you make sure that people answer the way it is supposed to be answered, right? How do you make sure that the answers are answers that you can use later on, not just yes and no? So you want to design a type of interview scheme or survey research or whatever you're doing there that will yield quality data to you, not just any junk data, not just one-word data, two-word data, right? And then the idea of authentication, to make sure that your data is original and authentic, right? Just in case you ask your friends or some numerators, right, to go out and collect data, they go under a coconut tree, they bring 10 survey forms, and instead they start doing creative data answering, right? So how do you make sure that they are giving authentic, original, real answers from informants or respondents or subjects? So you want to have that process as well. Maybe you want to, so like in Sempris, we have this process of data recalling. So if the numerators come back to you, it's okay, tell me about the house. Although the house is not part of data collection. So the person will go, okay, if you go about the house. What about the car? What do you remember about the car? What do you remember about the neighborhood? If it's a fake data collection process, the person might not even go to the field and not go to that particular street, the person might not know there's a coffee shop or there's a pet shop or there's a tattoo shop next to it, something like that. So that person cannot recall. So these are different ways of checking the originality, the authentication process, right? Also the verification process of the data verification might also involve checking with experts to verify the data, or in some research methodology, right? You go back to the research subjects or informants or respondents. You say, okay, is this what you say? I transcribe your work, I process your work. Is this what you say, right? So this is the gathering and managing data, right? And we put in the word piloting that. So the first process of gathering data is piloting your research, right? So if you want to collect 49 or 50 data from 50 respondents, you should start with just 4 or 5 or 10, and just to test your instruments, to test your sampling, whether your sampling, your instruments, the way you are conducting the field study or the processing the data, would that be a good way? Is it an effective way? Would that give you the type of findings that you want? If not, you might want to consider changing it So piloting is about experimenting with the instruments, with the sampling, and testing the gathering, the managing data method that you have. Then you want to see whether it works. If not, you want to improve it, right? So that's why we have piloting. I understand that in some fields, some universities, in fact, some countries, it's not emphasized sufficiently. They do not emphasize enough. But then piloting is part of ensuring that you have the high standards of research findings, research analysis afterwards. That's step number 7. Now we go to step number 8, conceptual formulation through data analysis. So now you have all the data being processed and stored and organized, right? So it's about coding the data, categorizing the data, and conceptualizing from the data. So you have all this data, and you look at the data. How can you code the data? You can put different parts together, categorize them, or these are people who say they agree, these people who say they disagree, or these people who say what they see, they're angry with it. They say, well, they are nonchalant, indifferent, they don't care about this, or this group of people, they like it very much, they're passionate about it. So you can classify the data differently, and then you start conceptualizing based on that. This is the process of data analysis happening. So conceptual, number 8 is a conceptual formulation and data analysis, right? And in the process of that, you also do verification, which actually this mentioned just now in step number 7. When you do piloting, right, you can verify your analysis, you can verify your findings, and you see, oh, is this what you meant when you say this? And you say red, does it mean courage? Does it mean passion? Does it mean love? What do you mean by red? So you check your analysis, you check your findings, right? So this is verification. And reconceptualizing, and after you verify and you clarify if you're not sure, right? You can reconceptualize better analysis, right? So there's conceptualizing process, reconceptualizing process, right? And then when we talk about conceptual, when we talk about number 8 as conceptual, the outcome is conceptual formulation, theory building, modeling, and generating of typologies. So when you have, at the end of this process, you have the conceptual formulation, maybe a framework, maybe a model, and maybe a tentative theory, right? So this is the process of theory building can start from this step number 8, right? And if you have to analyze it. You say, well, I've come up with 4 typologies of students' activism, right? 1 is this, 2 is that, 3 is this, 4 is that. So it's very fascinating, right? So 4 typologies of millennials activists, 4 typologies of Jakarta students organizations, for instance. Right? So typologies, or you talk about modeling, right? You can say when you have A, B, and C, and D, the tendency is you will have, and you put together with F and G, and at the end you will have X. But you put together in a different way, you have Y instead, right? So you have different modeling and different modeling outcomes, right? Also, in this step, you can have falsification, which is actually a great, wonderful thing to have if you're pursuing a master's and PhD degree. Why is that wonderful thing to have? Because theoretical falsification is a great contribution to knowledge. What you're doing, you're falsifying, you're negating, you're challenging, you're debunking a particular theory or study that has been put forth, implemented last time. Well, no, I've discovered something new. And if you look at the deductive research strategy, falsification is an important integral part of research strategy. Because what you want to do is to remove problematic theories and propositions and hypotheses. And when you remove the fakes, you move the false, you remove the weak, what you have is stronger and closer to the truth, right? You might not know the ultimate truth, but you can remove the fake, the false, the hoax, the incomplete, the skewed understanding of reality. So you can do that. Falsification it can be an aim or an outcome of your research, right? So that is step number 8. And step number 9 is just to bring your work to a closure, completing the written work. Why do we say completing? Because you are writing your work all along, not just at the end of your research. You should be writing your chapters 1 to 3, chapter 1, background, 2, your literature review, 3, your methodology, before you collect the data. So, and you can, this process is a progressive, continuous process, right? Until the end. But there must be a completion stage. Research work has a beginning and the end, especially when we talk about masters and PhDs, as well as any particular subject that you're doing, right? So what you do at this stage, you reconnect with the research questions. You want to show that this part of the findings answer this particular research question. This part of your findings answer your research question number 2. This part of your findings answer research question number 3, for instance. Yeah. So you reconnect with the research questions, research aims and objectives, right? Now understand that you need to have required format, right? If you're writing for your universities or institutions or for publication, understand what the required format is. Follow the required format. And in fact, it's better to start from the beginning to understand what the research required format is and stick to that format, right? Rather than wait until the end. You have, it's easier to start the process in page 1 and then just follow through with the right format, rather than when you have page 272 and then you want to go back page 1 and check all the format from the beginning and understand what the format is and follow the format. Checking of reference and table of contents, glossaries, the terms, you have all these acronyms and special technical terms. You want to have a glossaries explaining those terms and acronyms, graphs and visuals. Make sure they are there, they are complete. There must be a reference to that as well. If there's well referenced, if not, you want to state that this is part of your research. And identification of limitations and future research. Put that in, right? So in the future, how do we follow up from your research? That would be a great, wonderful thing to have. You can suggest to people, right? And you identify your own limitation, the limitation of your research. So you complete your written work using this guide, right? And finally, presentations and publication. So this is not necessarily not a must, but as scholars, as people in the field of knowledge, we want to share our work, our discoveries, right, and present it and have good discussions and listen to critics and criticisms and not just compliments, but you want to understand how you can move forward better, right? You get preliminary feedbacks and reviews and improve. And this is a process of improving the weaknesses of the research or the write-ups. Yeah? Think about co-authoring. So you can use your findings to co-author with other researchers who are in the field, or a master, a guru, right? And so sometimes the guru or the master or somebody who's senior, who have more experience in the field, can give new insights, can give new interpretation to your work, and it becomes of a higher quality, right? You can improve the quality. Think about which journal you want to publish your research, right? In fact, the last point there I said, resegmentation for multiple publications. So you need not publish all of your findings in one particular journal and one particular article. You can break it up. You say, well, I can have 3 different articles 4 or 5 different publications from this. So you find the right segments, segment it, you break it up, and you can turn it into many articles. And that's actually a wonderful thing to do as well, because oftentimes when we talk about publication, there's a word limit there, right? So you cannot write more than certain number of words, right? So there's only so much you can say, so much you can argue, and breaking up into different segments of write-ups is useful, right? And of course, publications. Once you have publication, you can celebrate. Yes, I've done it. So these are the 10-step process. 10-step process with the ES at the end there of qualitative research. In the 10-step process, remember that when you choose the research suitability, right, you want to ask also the question: is this to be done as a qualitative research or a quantitative research, right? So it doesn't mean that you want to start qualitative, it must be done qualitatively. Sometimes your research questions are better answered through quantitative methodology. So you have that part of your research when you choose the right research methodology. Do not close your mind to that. Or combined method. It could be exploratory research, which means you start with qualitative and then quantitative, or it can be a explanatory, which means you start quantitative research and then qualitative afterwards, right? So be open, and if you have viva or examination, oral examination, it's better for you to ask these questions first to yourself, right? Before the examiners ask these questions to you. And so be prepared and be open because you design your research, right? So the next slide, this is to recap, not to recap, just to reconnect to your research suitability as well. I did say just now that in the research suitability, you will need to think about your research strategy and research philosophy. This is, by the way, a separate lecture series, right? I've done a whole semester of lectures based on these 4 research strategies and 4 research philosophies when I was still in the social science. I taught a course on called philosophy of social research. And so, and it's about this whole 14 weeks is about this mainly. There are other parts, but mainly this. So what are the four inductive research strategy, deductive research strategy, abductive research strategy, and retroductive research strategy? I will not go too deeply into this part. Basically, the inductive research strategy uses positivism, which means it emphasizes on the idea of observation, of collecting data without bias, basically following the natural sciences, right? So you collect data. After you collect the data, you see the patterns behind the data, and then from there you generate explanations and theories and laws, if possibly. So like the law of gravity and economics, we have the law of supply and demand, for instance, right? So inductive research is about starting from the data and generate explanations and theories from the data, right? So that's inductive. Second one is deductive research strategy, which is opposite of inductive in a way. It starts with theory, and then from the theory you come up with hypothesis, and then you do hypothesis testing by collecting data, by going into the empirical world and collect data, and you test the data, whether the data support a particular theory or hypothesis, and then you reject the hypothesis that is weak and that doesn't explain the data, and then whatever remaining will be hypothesis will be tentatively supported, not the truth, right, but considered to be tentatively justified, right? So the whole philosophy behind is critical rationalism. Karl Popper is one of the proponents of this one. Is logic-centered, not observations on this. So it's about using logic to remove wherever inconsistent data from the research, to remove any false data. Remember, we'll talk about falsification. This is the research strategy, deductive research strategy with critical rationalism. So it's very critical. So it assumes that we can never arrive at the absolute truth, right? We can come close and closer to the truth, but we can never know what the absolute truth is. Whereas inductive is, basically the thinkers and the proponents of inductive research strategy. And the first one, they come from the natural sciences. Basically, they want to know the laws of the universe. They want to know God's thoughts, almost the absolute truth. How does something function in a particular manner, in a particular context, right? So you want to know truth. But here, the deductive research strategy will say, well, we can never know the ultimate truth. We can come close to the truth, right? That's the number two. Number three, retroductive research strategy is the supporting philosophy is scientific realism. They would argue that if you look at merely independent variables, it will be somewhat shallow. The research will be somewhat shallow, but you do not want just to look at two variables and come to some conclusion. For instance, you say, the bird chirping, the sun rises. The bird chirping, the sun rises. The bird chirping, sun rises. You keep on collecting this. Oh, so there's a correlation, maybe a causation. Because of the bird chirping, therefore the sun rises. No, that is a false logic, right? It's false. So, or you can look at the phenomena. You say, well, problematic families, problematic family, child delinquency. You say, you collect data of problematic family, child delinquency. Eventually, you say, well, because of this leads to that, right? You see two variables. But retroductive research strategy, that's just looking at the surface. But why is the problematic family produces child delinquency? There's a process to that, right? There's why is this leading to that? And that is the task of social scientists. So it's not just to look at the linkage, not just to look at the correlation between two variables, but to understand the generative mechanism, what causes the phenomena. So they believe that there's the three-layer reality, the real, the actual, and empirical. So when you collect empirical data, it's just up there, but the generative mechanism sometimes cannot be seen, right? It's almost like so when people talk about Western research strategy, we sometimes question Western research strategy. They only consider things that can be observed. No, that's not true. For retroductive research strategy, they actually will look into causes of reality that cannot be seen, right? For instance, when we talk about magnet, how many people have seen the power magnet, right? No one has seen the power magnet. We see the manifestation of magnet, the thing that attracts steel, a magnet. No one has seen the power, but the power exists. Whether there's an empirical manifestation or not, that is a different story. You've got to show that the magnet works by putting in, the paper clips, so the paper clips get attracted to the or gravitates to the magnet, and then you can see the manifestation of power. You cannot touch the power. It's not seen, right? It's not observable, but it's demonstratable. It can be demonstrated, right? And just like veto power in the United Nations, right? All the big bosses, right? Big tycoons, the godfathers of the world, right? United States, Britain, they all have superpower within they can veto anything. Who has seen veto power? You cannot touch veto power, but you can see veto power being exercised. You can see veto power whenever there's any resolution from the UN General Assembly to condemn Israel, right? United States will veto, will go against it, and that's a manifestation of veto power, the veto way, right? So that is the genetic mechanism. So scientific realism or retroductive research strategy wants to see that process of why certain things become what they become. Photosynthesis. Who has seen photosynthesis? The process of how plants produce energy and release oxygen and use carbon dioxide. No one has seen that one, but you can demonstrate that photosynthesis exists by showing that there are empirical data that connects this model of photosynthesis, therefore exists, right? You can prove it, right? So that is retroductive research strategy. And that's number 3. Number 4 is abductive research strategy. Abductive research strategy comes from the word abduct, to kidnap, right? So abductive research strategy, it's ontological assumption, epistemological assumption is that if you want to understand the social world, you ask the social actors who construct the social world, because social world is socially constructed, right? So in order to understand why people act the way people act, why is there such an institution, you ask people who create the institution, you ask people who behave that way, right? Instead of coming with your own theories, instead of testing some theory outside, right? You ask them, right? So the difference between this and inductive is inductive research will let the researcher do the observation and come up with the theories. Abductive research, no, you do not start with you start with the social actors. You ask the social actors, tell me, what do you experience, right? So phenomenology will be an example of abductive research. Tell me what you experience. What does it mean when you say it means a lot to give back money to my parents as I work here. I work hard. It's painful, but I'm grateful because of my hard work. I managed to contribute to my sister, brother to go to university, to my mother who needs to build a house, a new house, or whatever, right? So it's the meaning people attach to reality, not your meaning that you attach to reality, not your theory, but other people's own social construct of their subjective world, right? So it's interpretivism is the philosophy. So these are the research strategies. That is very brief. You can look at, listen and to my lectures on this for the 4 research strategies, right? And you go much more deeper and you will understand more about the 4 research strategies and 4 philosophies. All right, we go to the next one. Choose one out of 7 main types of qualitative research, plus. Yeah. Some of you have actually listened or have listened to my presentation of 7 qualitative research types, right? So just to run through very quickly. So when you choose your methodology, choose the type that matches your research process, that answers your research questions. Remember, the compass is your research question. So you want to find the right research methodology to match, to arrive as a plan to reach to your destination, to collect the data. So is it historical research, where the emphasis is on systematic accounts of past events, places, people, chronology, context, and the interconnections? Is that what you want to do? You want to look at how Iraq has transformed as a country from the period before Saddam Hussein, during Saddam Hussein, after United States occupation of it, the periods of historical research, one step, or hermeneutics. Number 2, holistic interpretation of text through understanding of the text within specific context. So you want to study Rumi's work, you want to study Confucius' work, you want to study the Holy Quran, right? Tafsir is another word for hermeneutics, right? So you are studying the text within a context. So the text is something that's written. It can be visual as well, it can be symbols as well. But you want to understand the text within a context. The text doesn't exist in a vacuum. It exists within a context. What is the context? The context can be the book, or the author's life history, or the society where the book or the text exists, or the series of other texts that's been written by the author, right? If you look at Imam Shafi'i, there's a earlier Imam Shafi'i, there's a later Imam Shafi'i. There's an evolution of thoughts, right? So you must understand the context. Early context is different, later context is different. You were studying Mao Zedong before Cultural Revolution and after Cultural Revolution is different. The policies, the paradigms might be different, right? So that's hermeneutics, and it's about studying the text. Number three is ethnography. Ethnography, and specifically anthropologists love to use it. Anthropologists employ that as a main research strategy, research methodology. It's about rich descriptions of culture or human society or social group. So you go immerse oneself into a social group, into a village or urban community among the urban poor, and live with the homeless, or you want to experience how is it, how's life among the Wall Street wolves, then you see, oh, this is the life, we live with them, find out how they live, and immerse yourself in their life, in their living for 6 months, 1 year, more than 1 year. Usually 6 months is too short, right? 1 year, even 2 years, right? And then at the end, you have this rich description. You can describe all the aspects of their life, of that particular social group. Or number four, grounded theory. Grounded theory is about theory formation or theory expansion through constant comparison, right? So it's about answering the why question. Why do people become what they become? Why do Nazis become gays? Why do gays become Nazis? If you look at my presentation, I do have that. Right? Why do there's a Russian gay Nazis, which is an embarrassment to the gays, an embarrassment to the Nazis, also probably an embarrassment to Putin. So you ask the question why, but you do it from the bottom up. What does it mean? You collect data. You do not start with theory. You collect your data and you compare the data with another data. It's called constant comparison approach. And you compare the data, and then when you compare the data with another data and another, you will have a certain concept. And then when you collect another data, you can have a concept, a different concept, right? So and then you compare the concept, and you keep on going through this process or iterative process of collecting data, comparing data and theory, data and concept and concept and concept and concept. Data. Eventually, you come to some kind of a model to explain the particular reality that you want to study. That's grounded theory. Right? It's an iterative process. All data you can study, interviews, documents, all considered, all allowed to be considered data. Number five, narrative research. A quick one about narrative research. The whole rationale is that if you don't understand an explanation, an experience, it should be understood within a story, right? So you want to understand why a particular student get depressed or why students get depressed. You understand the life story of the person. Let the person tell you his or her life story, and then from what part to what part, and then you will see the story is the context. The story is the narrative that gives meaning, to give a bigger picture to that particular experience or the particular subject that you want to study. So understand the narrative. And this, by the way, management uses this. So when you buy a phone, the experience of using a phone, for instance, cannot be understood separately from the life story of the person. Right? If you want to go deep, you understand the life story. Why? How did you choose this phone? Is it through the friends? And then what meanings you attach to the phone? It is this whole life story to it, right? Number six, phenomenology, which I encourage you all to understand. Phenomenology is about capturing the deep essences of experiences of a particular phenomena by capturing the pure meaning. So you're not just looking at experience at the surface level. You want to understand the consciousness that experience this reality. So the external reality, the outer reality, is not the real reality of the social actors. The reality is experienced internally. What is being interpreted by the social actors is the reality that you want to understand, right? So, like what Al-Rumi said, I'm not this hair, I'm not this skin, I'm the soul that lives within, right? It's not what you see, it's what I experience within myself. Is the meanings I attach. That gives me the experience, that gives me the interpretation, the perception of good or bad or pain or pleasure, right? So it's about capturing the pure meanings from the social actors, right? Number 7, case study is the probably most flexible of all, if not one of the most flexible methodology. In-depth analysis of a socially defined bounded entity in a real life context, right? So you might want to study a company, an NGO, you want to study something that's bounded, right? So say it's not an open space, but you could, but you want to do in-depth analysis of that particular case, a particular group, right? It can overlap with other methods, but what it means is within that. So, for instance, you are studying an organization, you could use in-depth analysis, you could do a document analysis, you could do observation, right, within that organization to understand that organization. So that is case study. Number 8 is that action research or qualitative experimental research. The important element in this is you're comparing between random groups with different stimulus. So you give different, you have groups that are randomized groups, right? And then this group is being taught by a German lecturer, a German teacher. This one is being taught by a French teacher. This one is being taught by a Mongolian teacher. And you see what effects that it has, right? So that's an example of action research, right? Or you say, well, I come up with this formula to memorize a lecture, right? Formula one using story link. You link one story to another, and you can memorize the whole thing. Or the other one, they use pegging system. You visualize a data and then put the data with a particular peg in your house, the room, the chair, whatever, and you test which one have better results. So and then you have this group that is not being treated by this stimulus or stimuli, right? So you have 3 groups: the control group, and you have experimental group 1, experimental group 3, right? And you can compare them, right? So and for qualitative research is when you use in-depth interviews and focus group, right? So this is action research using qualitative research. So the instruments are in-depth interviews, the instruments is focus group. So the data you get is still qualitative, right? But oftentimes in classroom situations, there's a tendency to use quantitative methodology even more. Now, I would encourage to use not just quantitative, but to combine with qualitative. But even qualitative alone can stand alone as a methodology if you have the right research questions that match your the methodology. So these are the 7++. There are more, of course, the types of methodology, right? So I come to the end of the presentation. So terima kasih. And do you want to pursue your postgraduate degree in master's or PhD or research collaboration with us? You're welcome to come to Sempris, come to me. Right. Thank you very much. Email me if you have any questions. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi. Have a good day. Some people say take care and have a good day. I would add, take charge and make it a good day.